The morning lights of the studio felt brighter than usual as Post Malone took his seat at the famous round table, smiling politely while the audience applauded. What began as a routine celebrity appearance quickly shifted in tone when the conversation drifted from music to social responsibility. Post listened quietly at first, nodding and offering short replies, but the tension in his posture hinted that something deeper was brewing beneath the surface, something he hadn't planned to unpack on live television that day. Joy Behar leaned forward, her voice sharp yet controlled, framing a question about fame and influence that landed heavier than expected. She suggested that artists like Post Malone carried a duty to address political and cultural issues directly. The comment drew murmurs from the audience. Post's smile faded slightly, replaced by a thoughtful pause, as if he were weighing how honest he could be without igniting exactly the kind of moment he usually tries to avoid. As the discussion continued, Joy pressed harder, questioning whether silence from major stars could be interpreted as indifference. Post Malone shifted in his chair, fingers tapping lightly against the table. He explained that his music came from personal pain and healing, not from a desire to lecture. His voice remained calm, but the emotion behind his words was unmistakable, revealing a frustration he rarely shows in public interviews. Joy responded quickly, suggesting that avoiding these topics was itself a statement. The studio air grew tense, and even the other hosts appeared cautious, glancing between the two. Post inhaled deeply, his eyes briefly closing, as though grounding himself. When he spoke again, his tone sharpened, making it clear that this conversation had crossed from casual debate into something far more personal for him. Post Malone explained that he grew up feeling misunderstood, and that music was his refuge, not a platform for political alignment. He emphasized that fans connected to his songs because of shared emotions, not shared opinions. The audience listened closely, some nodding in agreement. Yet Joy countered by arguing that artists couldn't separate their influence from their art once they reached a certain level of fame. The exchange grew more intense, with Post's voice rising slightly as he defended his right to choose how he uses his platform. He stressed that authenticity mattered more than forced statements, and that speaking without conviction felt dishonest. The studio grew quieter, every word hanging in the air. It was clear that this was no longer just a discussion for television, but a clash of deeply held beliefs. Joy, unwavering, challenged him by asking whether comfort was being prioritized over responsibility. That question seemed to strike a nerve. Post Malone leaned forward, his usually relaxed demeanor replaced by visible agitation. He explained that mental health struggles were real, and that being pushed into constant commentary could be damaging, not just for him but for many artists watching from afar. Applause erupted from parts of the audience, while others remained silent. Post continued, speaking candidly about anxiety and the pressure of public expectation. His honesty shifted the mood slightly, but Joy remained firm, acknowledging mental health while still insisting that influence came with unavoidable expectations. The contrast between empathy and critique made the moment feel raw and unscripted. As the conversation circled back, Post's frustration finally boiled over. He clarified that he wasn't refusing to care, but refusing to be boxed onto narratives created by others. His words came faster now, each sentence layered with emotion. The hosts attempted to mediate, but the exchange had already taken on a life of its own, captivating everyone in the studio. Joy responded with a final pointed remark, suggesting that choosing not to speak was still a choice with consequences. That was the moment Post Malone visibly snapped. He pushed his chair back slightly, shaking his head, and stated that he came to share music and humanity, not to be the judge for what he didn't say. The room fell into stunned silence. Post stood up, apologizing briefly to the audience but not backing down from his stance. He explained that being cornered on live television felt unfair and unproductive. His voice cracked for just a second, revealing the emotional toll of the confrontation. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail as viewers at home sensed that this was no longer a typical daytime TV exchange. The hosts tried to de-escalate, urging him to stay and continue the discussion. Post paused, looking around the studio, then back at Joy. He reiterated that conversations should invite understanding, not confrontation. The tension was palpable, and the audience seemed unsure whether to clap, gasp, or remain silent as the moment stretched on. With the final nod, Post Malone decided to walk off the set. He thanked the other hosts for their time, then turned and exited, leaving behind a stunned panel and a buzzing studio. The cameras lingered on the empty chair, a powerful visual that underscored the intensity of what had just unfolded in real time. Backstage, sources later claimed Post was visibly shaken but resolute. He reportedly expressed disappointment that the conversation became adversarial instead of constructive. For him, the moment symbolized a larger issue in media, where nuance often gets lost in favor of viral confrontation. Though emotional, he stood by his decision, believing it was necessary for his own well-being. In the studio, Joy addressed the audience, clarifying her intentions and emphasizing the importance of dialogue. She acknowledged that emotions run high when discussing influence and responsibility. The remaining hosts echoed the sentiment, attempting to steer the show back to balance, though the energy had undeniably shifted after Post's abrupt exit. Social media exploded within minutes of the broadcast. Clips of the confrontation circulated rapidly, sparking debates across platforms. Some viewers praised Post Malone for setting boundaries and speaking openly about mental health, while others sided with Joy, arguing that public figures should be prepared for tough questions about their impact on society. Fans flooded Post's accounts with messages of support, thanking him for his honesty and vulnerability. Many shared personal stories of feeling pressured to speak or act beyond their comfort zones. The moment resonated far beyond celebrity gossip, touching on broader conversations about authenticity, mental health, and the expectations placed on influential voices. Critics, however, argued that walking off avoided accountability. They suggested that difficult conversations are necessary, especially on platforms designed for debate. The polarized reactions highlighted how divided audiences are when it comes to the role of celebrities in social and political discourse, making the incident a cultural flashpoint rather than a fleeting TV moment. Media outlets quickly picked up the story, analyzing body language, tone, and context. Headlines framed the moment as an eruption, while others described it as a boundary being drawn. Each interpretation added another layer to the narrative, ensuring the incident stayed in the news cycle far longer than a typical talk show appearance. Joy Behar later addressed the incident in subsequent episodes, maintaining that her questions were fair and rooted in concern about influence. She emphasized respect for Post Malone's artistry while standing by her belief that conversation, even when uncomfortable, is necessary. Her response added complexity to the story, preventing it from being seen as one-sided. Post Malone, in contrast, remained mostly quiet after the show, letting the moment speak for itself. When he did address it indirectly, he reiterated the importance of kindness and understanding. He avoided naming names, focusing instead on the broader message of protecting mental health and creative integrity in an often unforgiving spotlight. The incident sparked wider industry conversations among artists and hosts alike. Some praised Post for vocalizing what many feel but rarely say on air. Others urged talk shows to rethink how they approach sensitive topics with guests whose primary purpose is to share creative work, not defend personal philosophies under pressure. Viewers revisiting the clip noticed subtle details, the pauses, the shifting expressions, the rising tension. What made the moment compelling wasn't just the disagreement, but the humanity on display. It served as a reminder that behind every celebrity image is a person navigating expectations, emotions, and personal limits in front of millions. For The View, the episode became one of its most talked about segments of the year. Ratings spiked, and discussions continued long after the broadcast ended. The show stood by its format of open dialogue, while acknowledging that balancing challenge and respect remains an ongoing process in live television. For Post Malone, the walk-off became part of his public narrative, not as a scandal, but as a statement. Fans interpreted it as an act of self-preservation rather than defiance. It reinforced his image as an artist driven by emotion and honesty, even when that honesty leads to uncomfortable, unpredictable outcomes. Industry experts weighed in, noting that such moments reflect the changing relationships between celebrities and media. Artists are increasingly vocal about boundaries, While shows continue to push for provocative content, the clash between these trends often results in moments like this, raw, unscripted, and deeply divisive. As weeks passed, the intensity of the debate slowly softened, but the questions remained. What does society truly expect from artists? Where is the line between influence and obligation? The Post Malone and Joy Behar confrontation became a reference point in these discussions, cited whenever similar debates arose elsewhere. In hindsight, many viewers acknowledged that both sides raised valid points. Joy highlighted the power of influence, while Post emphasized personal well-being and authenticity. The inability to reconcile those perspectives in the moment is what made the exchange so explosive, yet also so memorable and meaningful. The legacy of the incident lies not in who won the argument, but in the conversation it sparked. It challenged audiences to reconsider how they consume media, how they judge public figures, and how quickly debates can escalate when empathy gives way to expectation under bright studio lights. Ultimately, the walk-off served as a mirror reflecting broader cultural tensions. It reminded viewers that live television is unpredictable, that real emotions don't always fit neat narratives, and that sometimes stepping away is as powerful as speaking out. The moment remains etched in pop culture as a clash that went far beyond a single show. In the days that followed, entertainment analysts revisited Post Malone's earlier interviews, pointing out how consistently he had spoken about vulnerability, creativity, and staying true to himself. The confrontation on the show was reframed by many as an inevitable collision between a media environment hungry for strong opinions and an artist who values emotional honesty over public positioning. This reframing softened some criticism while deepening the cultural relevance of the moment. Talk show producers across networks quietly took note, discussing internally how guest conversations could spiral when expectations aren't clearly aligned. Some insiders suggested that pre-interview boundaries might become more common, especially with artists known for avoiding political or ideological debates. The incident became a case study in how quickly live television can shift from promotion to provocation without careful moderation. Fans attending Post Malone's subsequent concerts noticed subtle changes in his onstage remarks. He spoke more openly about pressure, about feeling seen versus being judged, and about music as a place of refuge. While he never directly referenced the confrontation, the emotional undercurrent was unmistakable, and audiences responded with louder cheers and deeper connection during his performances. Meanwhile, online discourse continued evolving, with longer think pieces replacing initial hot takes. Writers explored the psychological toll of fame and the assumption that visibility equals obligation. Post Malone's reaction was cited alongside similar moments from other celebrities who have pushed back against being turned into spokespeople rather than artists, highlighting a broader shift in celebrity culture. Joy Behar's supporters argued that the role of a talk show host is to challenge, not to comfort. They pointed out that difficult questions often lead to meaningful dialogue, even when guests resist. To them, the confrontation represented the show doing exactly what it was designed to do, regardless of how uncomfortable the outcome may have been for those involved. Others countered that tone and timing matter just as much as content. They argued that ambush-style questioning undermines trust and turns dialogue into performance. In this view, Post Malone's eruption was less about avoiding responsibility and more about rejecting a format that prioritizes viral moments over genuine understanding and thoughtful exchange. Academic voices entered the discussion as well, analyzing the moment through the lens of media ethics. They questioned whether live television creates an environment that encourages emotional escalation rather than resolution. The incident was even referenced in university classes focused on communication, celebrity studies, and modern media dynamics. As the weeks turned into months, the clip remained a frequent recommendation in algorithm-driven feeds, resurfacing whenever debates about celebrity responsibility flared up again. Each resurgence brought new audiences and fresh interpretations, proving that the confrontation had transcended its original context to become a lasting cultural artifact. Post Malone's management team reportedly adjusted future media appearances, favoring formats that allowed for longer, more nuanced conversations. Podcasts and in-depth interviews became more prominent, spaces where he could express himself without interruption or pressure to react instantly under studio lights and audience expectations. The View, on the other hand, leaned into its identity as a space for spirited debate. Promotional teasers highlighted the show's willingness to ask tough questions, subtly embracing the controversy as proof of relevance. While some viewers were turned off, others tuned in precisely because of the unpredictability the incident represented. Over time, even critics began acknowledging that the moment revealed something essential about modern fame. Celebrities are expected to be entertainers, activists, and role models simultaneously, often without regard for personal boundaries. Post Malone's walk-off challenged that expectation, forcing audiences to reconsider where empathy fits into public discourse. The incident also sparked private conversations among artists who reached out to Post, thanking him for expressing what they felt but feared saying publicly. These messages, though unseen by the public, underscored the quiet impact of the moment within the creative community, where pressure to conform can be just as intense as public scrutiny. From a viewer's perspective, the confrontation became a reminder that live television still holds the power to surprise. In an era of heavily edited content and rehearsed talking points, the rawness of the exchange felt almost jarring, pulling audiences back to the reality that not everything can be controlled once the cameras start rolling. Years from now, the moment may be remembered less for the argument itself and more for what it symbolized. It captured a snapshot of a cultural crossroads, where expectations, mental health awareness, and media responsibility collided in a single, unscripted exchange that left no one entirely unchanged. In the end, the story of Post Malone erupting on The View isn't about anger alone, but about boundaries, authenticity, and the evolving relationships between public figures and the platforms that host them. It stands as a powerful example of how one moment of emotional truth can ripple outward, shaping conversations long after the studio lights dim. As the conversation continued to echo online, viewers began rewatching the full episode rather than isolated clips, noticing how the tension built gradually instead of exploding out of nowhere. Small interruptions, overlapping dialogue, and subtle shifts in tone revealed how easily misunderstanding can snowball on live television. For many, this deeper viewing changed their perspective, turning a viral outburst into a layered human interaction shaped by timing and pressure. Cultural commentators noted that Post Malone's reaction reflected a generational shift in how younger public figures approach visibility. Unlike earlier eras where stars were expected to endure tough questioning silently, modern artists increasingly prioritize emotional safety and self-definition. This shift doesn't reject dialogue, but it does challenge older media traditions that equate resilience with silent endurance rather than honest pushback. The moment also reignited discussion about masculinity and vulnerability in the public eye. Post's visible emotion contrasted sharply with the stereotype of detached celebrity composure. Many praised him for showing discomfort rather than masking it, arguing that such moments help normalize emotional expression for men, especially in industries where toughness and detachment are often mistaken for strength. Advertisers and sponsors quietly watched the fallout, aware that public sentiment can influence brand alignment. While some initially worried about controversy, the overwhelmingly supportive fan response reassured them. In fact, the incident humanized Post Malone further, reinforcing his image as relatable and sincere rather than manufactured, a quality brands increasingly value in long-term partnerships. Media psychologists weighed in, explaining how live confrontations can trigger fight-or-flight responses, especially when identity and values feel challenged. In that context, Post's decision to leave wasn't avoidance but a natural response to emotional overload. This analysis added a scientific lens to the debate, shifting focus from blame to understanding human behavior under stress. International audiences also reacted strongly, with viewers from different cultures interpreting the exchange through their own social norms. In some regions, walking off was seen as disrespectful, while in others it was viewed as an act of dignity. This global reaction highlighted how media moments can take on entirely different meanings depending on cultural context and values. As fan-made videos, reaction clips, and commentary flooded platforms, the original confrontation evolved into a shared narrative shaped by millions of voices. Each remix, opinion, and analysis added another layer, transforming a single broadcast moment into an ongoing, collective conversation about media, power, and personal limits in the digital age. Post Malone's silence following the incident became part of this story itself. Instead of issuing lengthy statements or apologies, he allowed the public to sit with the discomfort of the moment. This restraint contrasted sharply with the usual celebrity crisis playbook and, for many supporters, reinforced the authenticity of his earlier words on the show. The incident also encouraged viewers to reflect on their own expectations of public figures. Many admitted they had unconsciously demanded constant clarity, opinions, and leadership from entertainers, without considering the emotional cost. In that way, the confrontation served as a mirror, prompting audiences to question not just the media, but their own consumption habits. Behind the scenes, conversations reportedly took place between producers, hosts, and network executives about recalibrating interview approaches. While debate remained central to the show's identity, there was acknowledgement that creating space for guests to disengage gracefully might prevent similar blow-ups without diluting the show's core purpose. For aspiring artists watching from home, the moment carried a different lesson. It demonstrated that success doesn't require surrendering personal boundaries, and that it's possible to say no, even on the biggest platforms. This message resonated strongly with creatives navigating early careers in an industry known for blurred lines between access and expectation. Over time, the confrontation began appearing in broader discussions about burnout, not just in entertainment but across professions. Viewers connected Post's reaction to their own experiences of being pushed beyond comfort in meetings, interviews, or public settings, making the moment relatable far beyond celebrity culture. As newer controversies emerged and headlines shifted, the intensity surrounding the incident slowly faded, but it never fully disappeared. It remained a reference point, resurfacing whenever conversations turned to media pressure, emotional honesty, or the evolving responsibilities of those in the public eye. Looking back, many agreed that the power of the moment lay in its imperfection. There was no tidy resolution, no clear winner, only a raw exchange that reflected real-world complexity. That lack of closure is precisely what kept the story alive, inviting continued reflection rather than definitive judgment. Ultimately, the extended fallout from Post Malone's eruption underscored a simple truth often lost in televised debate. Conversation requires consent as much as courage. When that balance tips, even the most polished stages can become places of fracture, leaving behind moments that challenge, provoke, and endure far longer than anyone expects. In retrospect, media historians may mark this confrontation as part of a broader transition era, where the rules of celebrity engagement began to visibly crack. The expectation that artists must always be composed, agreeable, and endlessly available for interrogation is slowly being questioned. Post Malone's reaction, whether praised or criticized, became evidence that those long-standing norms are no longer universally accepted. Viewers who initially reacted with shock later described feeling a strange sense of appreciation for the honesty of the moment. Unlike polished interviews filled with rehearsed answers, this exchange revealed uncertainty, discomfort, and emotion in real time. That authenticity, even when messy, reminded audiences that unscripted television can still capture something profoundly real. The confrontation also highlighted how quickly empathy can be overshadowed by agenda in public discourse. As the debate intensified, many realized how easily conversations shift from understanding to winning. This realization sparked discussions about listening versus responding, and whether modern media truly leaves room for pauses, reflection, and mutual respect. For Post Malone's career, the moment didn't become a setback but a defining chapter. His music continued to chart, his fan base remained loyal, and his image evolved into that of an artist unafraid to protect his emotional space. Rather than damaging his reputation, the incident reinforced the bond between him and listeners who value sincerity over spectacle. On the audience side, The walk-off encouraged more critical viewing habits. Some viewers admitted they now watch talk shows with greater awareness of how questions are framed and how pressure is applied. This shift, though subtle, represents a growing media literacy shaped by moments where the mechanics of television become impossible to ignore. Industry insiders later remarked that moments like these are inevitable in a climate driven by immediacy and virality. When strong personalities collide under live conditions, outcomes are unpredictable. The Post Malone and Joy Behar exchange became a reminder that not every powerful moment can be neatly packaged or controlled, no matter how experienced the participants. The emotional residue of the incident lingered, not as outrage but as contemplation. Many viewers found themselves thinking about it days later, replaying lines and expressions in their minds. That lingering effect is rare in modern media and speaks to how deeply the moment tapped into shared feelings of pressure, identity, and self-definition. As new generations of artists rise, this confrontation may quietly influence how they negotiate interviews and public appearances. It serves as an unspoken precedent, suggesting that walking away can sometimes be a valid response, not an act of weakness but a form of self-respect in environments that feel misaligned. The story also reaffirmed that disagreement doesn't always require resolution to be meaningful. Sometimes, the value lies in exposure, revealing fault lines that already exist beneath the surface. By bringing those tensions into the open, the moment contributed to an ongoing cultural conversation that continues to evolve. In the final analysis, the eruption on live television stands as a testament to the power of authenticity in an age of performance. It reminds audiences and media alike that behind every viral clip is a human moment, shaped by emotion, context, and limits, and that those moments, however uncomfortable, often carry the most lasting impact.